Hello and welcome to Auspol Explained. My name is David, your long curly haired host, and today I'm sitting down with someone from the AEC via Zoom. We're going to be talking about what the AEC does and also what they don't do. We're going to be asking them all sorts of things about how they're independent, what they can or cannot regulate, all these sorts of things. So let's dive right into it. Hello, could you please introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and also a brief physical description for accessibility?
G'day, my name is Alex Morris. I'm a spokesperson for the AEC and I am roughly dad-shaped. So I am a man in his late 30s, early 40s, short brown hair, suit, jacket, no tie, and that's how we roll here at the AEC.
I like how in your description you give us a little mystery like, how old am I? No one knows. That's not for the public to know. That's the public to sort of guess. Let's reveal some more important mysteries. What does the AEC do?
So at the Australian Electoral Commission, or the AEC as we call ourselves, we're responsible for running federal elections and referendums all around Australia. So the AEC is a pretty busy agency. Roughly every 3 years, we run a federal election for usually the entire 150 members of the House of Representatives and around half of the 76-member Senate. I say half because the Senate is normally a bit of a continuing body and only goes up for a full election of all senators if there's a double dissolution. We haven't had one of those in quite a few years now.
Yeah, it's a good point that you made. You do federal elections, not state elections, which is, I suppose, a common complaint. Do you get lots of people asking you about, oh, the New South Wales state election is happening, how do I do this?
Yeah, that's a really common misconception we get at the AEC. I think it's one of the dangers of being a bit of a prominent agency. People, particularly democracy nerds like you and I, I'm sure, love talking about the AEC, love reaching out to the AEC on social media. And when you're so accessible and so public, people see you and associate you with elections and go, well, you must be running this state election or this council election I'm voting in. We don't. There are state and territory electoral commissions all around the country that run state and local council and territory elections, and we work with them quite closely. We have a sort of a collaborative body called ECANS, which is sort of an electoral commissioners forum from around Australia and New Zealand.
You know, every election I see people complaining to the AEC, why haven't you done X? Why can't you do Y? So what are some common complaints that the AEC gets about things that it just doesn't have the power to act on?
Oh, there's so many examples. It's a really common one that we see, particularly across social media. Usually it boils down to why haven't you done this? Why haven't you prevented this candidate I don't like from running in the election? Or why have you not taken action against this candidate for doing a thing I don't like? It tends to be people specifically complaining about candidates or actions that they specifically don't like. The answer to that question, 9 times out of 10, is going to be because the AEC doesn't have any legal power to take that action. So using the example of Section 44 and eligibility of candidates, we don't have any power to judge whether a candidate is eligible to run for Parliament or not. We're actually legally excluded from making that decision. All we can do is what we're enabled to do by the law, which in the case of eligibility is to put the Section 44 checklist up on our website for that individual candidate and to let the public make their own decision.
I think it's also important to note when it comes to something like that, in that, determining if someone is constitutionally eligible to run for Parliament, that's a judicial power. That's for the High Court to decide. So if anyone's like, oh, well, we should just give the AEC that power to decide it, somewhat very difficult to give you judicial power, but also, I suppose another element would be effectively not giving you that power ensures that you can be apolitical and that you can't risk the AEC swooping in and going, this one candidate, we're going to make them ineligible. Simply removing that power from you just ensures that you can't interfere with who gets to run for Parliament.
You've touched on a really important point there. So we are absolutely politically neutral in everything that we do. It's a really, really core and key part of who we are at the AEC. And that comes up a lot, particularly when we're asked about truth in political advertising, which is another one of those great questions that we get a lot. People say, well, why can't you do anything about this? The AEC should regulate this. We don't have any legal power. The Parliament tells us the power that we have, and they have not told us that we have this power. It's also something that we have argued that the AEC, particularly around truth, the AEC, we don't believe should be the arbiter of truth in electoral communication, because you start to get close to a very, what we think is a dangerous line where we are, on one hand, the impartial administrator of Australia's electoral system, which is, widely acclaimed for being fair and independent and transparent. But on the other hand, people are then asking us to step in and make what can be perceived as quite partisan comments about, candidate X has said this and it's obviously a lie, and the AEC has said it's a lie. Candidate X's followers obviously wouldn't be very happy with us for doing that. So we think that if this power were to exist, and we're not opposed to it existing, we think it should be handled by a different agency that's not the AEC, just so that our impartiality can remain intact for those elections.
The AEC does not comment on, if candidate X makes a claim that candidate Y eats babies or whatever, even though that's clearly false, you can't say anything about that. But you can and do say that things claimed by people, if they are factually wrong about the electoral process, are wrong. So you do have, a disinformation register every election to sort of tell people, hey, this is a false claim. This is not how voting works, because it is. I believe it's illegal actually to mislead people about how filling in a ballot works, right?
Yeah, that's a bit of a obscure part of the Electoral Act, but you're absolutely right that we do have an important legal responsibility to inform and educate Australians about the electoral system. It's actually Section 7 of the Commonwealth Electoral Act. So pretty much the first bit of law you actually find after the title card is that power that we have to inform and educate. And it's something we take seriously. We have a disinformation register, and where there are false claims made about the system that, of course, we run, we're the experts in, we're going to step in and nip that in the bud where we possibly can, because it's important that Australians are able to go to the polling place as informed as they can be about the process they're participating in.
How does the AEC balance that need to be apolitical and impartial with the potential for a political candidate to make false claims about the electoral process? You do very rarely put out media releases that say, there have been X claim about how things work. With the voice referendum, some politicians were claiming that an X was unfairly being dismissed as not a formal vote, whereas a tick was being treated as a yes, despite legal advice that the AEC has that is how things can and should run. I suppose that's a bit of a difficult thing, but how do you balance trying to maintain that impartiality with the reality that sometimes even politicians or candidates will make false claims about the electoral process?
Absolutely. It can be a really difficult balancing act for the AEC. And of course, we do need to remember that political neutrality, which is central to everything that we do. I think in the case that you've mentioned with the ticks and crosses at the referendum, I think a significant factor there was that Australians had not gone to a referendum in something like 25 years. It had been almost exactly 25 years between the 1999 Republic referendum and the voice referendum in 2023. So you had this whole generation of politicians and political parties and of course voters as well, who had just not grown up with referendums as something that they'd participated in, something that they needed to be across, something that they could communicate around. And we saw a lot during the referendum of people just sort of, quickly coming up to speed on their understanding of what the actual laws were, the way things had stood, previous rulings around, things like ticks and crosses. At the end of the day, our job is to follow the law, to always follow the law. The ticks and crosses one was something that had been very thoroughly litigated at previous referendums, so we had quite strong legal backing to fall back on there. And at the end of the day, the job there is to just communicate the state of play, the way that the electoral system operates, to the voting public.
The AEC can actually do some things. Your remit is pretty narrow and specific, but let's talk about what can the AEC do. For example, if there's an electoral matter that doesn't have proper authorization, there is a complaint form that we could lodge with the AEC to be like, hey, this political candidate is trying to advertise to us without actually telling us who is advertising to us. What things can the AEC do other than just the physical handing out of ballot papers and counting?
When it comes to the regulation that we can do, there are a lot of different factors there. When we're talking about authorization in particular, which is something that's come up a few times during this most recent 2025 federal election, we can step in and educate and inform candidates or parties or campaigners about what they need to be doing. And if that first educative step isn't followed, we have a few additional powers on top of that. During the election, we issued quite a few statements, basically pointing out instances where political communication hadn't been authorised. That includes a pro-union group that was advertising on Facebook without any form of authorisation at all, despite us reaching out multiple times. It also includes an instance in Wentworth where around 47,000 flyers were issued that were very, very electoral in content, but were not authorised at all. Without talking about those individual cases, because obviously they're still ongoing, the AEC does have the power to, as a regulator, we can take people to court if we believe that some form of penalty needs to be applied. We've done that in a few cases around the 2022 federal election. A couple of those cases are still ongoing, which I think shows that the wheel of justice turns slowly, but it does turn. In fact, one of those cases, as we speak, is before the High Court. So there can be quite a bit of additional playtime on some of these actions where they do happen. But we do have that power. We also have the power to, where there are criminal offences in the Electoral Act, like you're misleading or deceptive about the act of casting a vote, or even things like enrolment or voter fraud, we can refer those to the Australian Federal Police, who are one of our partners as part of the Electoral Integrity Assurance Task Force. And the AFP can investigate, and ultimately that it's up to the AFP then to make a decision about whether charges need to be laid, whether a prosecution can be made, that sort of thing.
I should probably quickly add, for those who don't know what authorization of electoral matter is, at the end of an ad, for example, where it goes black and there's the white text and like authorized by blah, 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 that's what we're referring to. If people see electoral matter that is not authorized, when it clearly should be, they can lodge a complaint with you.
And that's something we actually do. If you've followed us on Instagram or on our new TikTok at the AEC, you'll see that we have authorization messages at the end of all of our videos. They're written and spoken, which is the legal requirement for authorization on video content on socials. Even though we're legally not required to do that, we do it as an example of best practice.
The AEC does not give legal advice, but it's something like, if unsure, just authorize it just in case, I think is the sort of paraphrasing of what you say on your website.
If in doubt, authorize, always.
The AEC is an independent and apolitical body. Naturally, I'm sure you've seen plenty of comments. I've seen plenty of comments under my videos complaining that you're not independent or not understanding how you could be independent because the government gives you money to operate. So how are you an independent and apolitical body?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And it's one of those things where, I mean, you're technically right, but also technically kind of wrong. So the government doesn't give us money, the Parliament gives us money out of consolidated revenue. That's how the budget works. That is why the Treasurer announcing the budget and passing it through the Parliament is so important. That is actually the Parliament, not the government, making decisions about how consolidated revenue should be spent over the next year or so, which can be a really, really important debate. Tends not to be, because the government often has the numbers in the Parliament, but there can be parliamentary decisions made about how revenue is spent. Now, of course, the AEC is statutorily independent, which means that our independence is enshrined in the Electoral Act. And that means that we do operate, even though the government does give us money through the Parliament, we operate at arm's length from the government. In media parts of other APS agencies, you'd see around the Australian Public Service, you'd be working pretty closely with your Minister's Office and your Ministerial Media Advisor. We barely talk to them. In fact, we don't talk to them at all during elections, because during caretaker, we have basically no contact at all. It is a very, very independent system. In fact, we are widely regarded as basically best practice around the world in terms of independence and transparency and security of the electoral process. It's something all Australians should be really proud of.
So for those who don't understand how like ministers and public services work, so ministers are in charge of managing government services and departments. So, Minister for Health is in charge of the health department, for example, and will be making executive decisions on that particular portfolio and, talking to people who are part of actually that organizational structure. How much does the minister actually talk to the AEC? What can the minister actually tell the AEC to do, if anything?
There's not an awful lot, honestly. We have our independence is enshrined by the Electoral Act, and most of our functions are as well. So a great example is the size of the Parliament. A year after the first Parliament sits after an election, the Electoral Commissioner, not the Minister, is responsible for making a determination about how many seats every state and territory is entitled to. That is a process that happens entirely within the AEC, and it can kick off redistributions around the country. It is not the responsibility of the minister at all. So we really are an independent agency and do a lot of our work off our own bat.
For those who aren't aware, Parliament has a bunch of committees where they sit down and examine issues or organisations in more detail. And the AEC, I believe, regularly submits details to committees about electoral matters.
You're absolutely right. And the most important committee for us, from an electoral perspective, is the Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Matters. Now, a joint committee means that it's got members from the House and the Senate. And a standing committee means that it is set and continues between Parliament to Parliament. Electoral Matters does a really, really important job after every election, and that is that they do a review of that election. We're expecting that inquiry to kick off in the next couple of months. As we're recording this, the Parliament hasn't sat yet, but we're getting close. And when that happens, JSCAM will be reformed. The Special Minister of State will refer that inquiry to JSCAM, and we'll be off to the races. Now, the AEC participates very, very thoroughly with these reviews, as we should, because it is basically a review into our performance at the election. So we will make one of several submissions to the inquiry, written submissions. We also appear before JSCAM pretty regularly. I would expect us to appear at least half a dozen times at various hearings that the committee decides to hold towards the end of next year, I would suggest, and early into next year, as it considers, questions arising from this federal election. And what that process is intended to do is essentially for the Parliament to make recommendations about what can be improved for the next election. So it's not the AEC's job to advocate for changes to the Electoral Act. That really is the job that JSCAM does on behalf of the Parliament. JSCAM then makes a report to the Parliament with its recommendations, and it's up to the Parliament, the House and the Senate, to consider those recommendations and consider what it would like to do off the back of that report. Now, if all of what I've said sounds a bit obscure or sounds like it's not something that you can participate in, that's not the case at all. JSCAM is a completely public process. So you, as J random YouTube watcher, can absolutely make a submission to the JSCAM inquiry into this year's federal election. A submission doesn't need to be, a serious, write 10 pages about what you think. It can be an email. It can be a video. It can be whatever you want it to be. And JSCAM can, receive your thoughts that way. And then, you are contributing to the inquiry in that way. You might even be asked to appear at a hearing down the track. So, enjoy, get involved.
Yeah, people should submit to committees and inquiries to help Parliament actually understand how things could be improved.
There's this idea that democracy is something that you do once every 3 years. You go and vote, you have your democracy sausage, and that's it. You're done till 2028, right? That's not the case. The Parliament sits for those 3 years, and committees like JSCAM, like many other parliamentary committees as well, do some really, really important work, soliciting questions and opinions from the public, gathering evidence that can inform the way that the Parliament makes decisions. And that is something that all Australians can take part in. And it's something that you really should consider if you're at all interested in Australian politics or democracy or a subject matter.
Absolutely right. And when you mentioned, you could be asked to appear at a hearing, just so people are aware, it's not scary. It's not like a court. A hearing is just where they're like, hey, we have some more questions. Can we ask you some more questions to learn more about whatever it is that you can offer. You're not being grilled.
JSCAM hearings that I've seen have all been very, very polite and productive as well. So, don't watch Senate estimates and think that it's all going to be, argy-bargy and confrontation. They really are there to learn and to learn from you.
Before we finish this up, I do have an unexpected question. I did not prepare you for this in advance. Why are you erasing my pencil vote? Why are you rubbing it out and putting in something else? Admit it.
I'll refer you to the disinformation register on that one, which says that that is complete BS. It is something that has come up time after time after time in elections. The real question that people are asking, I think, when they ask that question is, why does the AEC provide pencils? Why don't you provide pens? To answer that, I would say go to Far North Queensland and try and store a pen for 3 years between elections and see what happens to the ink in the tropics. It's not good. It doesn't tend to be good for whatever's surrounding the pens as well. The other thing is that we need to procure around 500,000 or so pencils for elections, and pencils are a lot cheaper than pens. And that is really important when you're buying 500,000 or something. If you want to bring a pen to an election, if you want to vote in pen, absolutely do that. But having just come from watching some votes being counted in Bradfield, in Fowler and other parts of Sydney, votes in pen can smudge. And I've seen multiple examples at this election of people who have very proudly voted in pen and gone, well, you're not going to be able to rub this out. No one's rubbing out your vote. That's silly. But the pen then gets smudged, the ink gets smudged when the paper gets folded, and the vote is then invalid because it can't be read. So you really need to think about, the formality of your vote. Pencil doesn't smudge, it doesn't leak, it doesn't run, and that means that it's a much easier job for us to be able to interpret your will as the voter.
A classic excuse from the AEC trying to...
Dear idea.
That'll really get them going in the comments. That'll be great. Well, thank you very much for your time. Is there anything else that you'd like us to know about the AEC before we go?
A couple of things on the horizon. For anyone who is thinking, the AEC is going to take a breather over the next 2.5 years before the next federal election, we're expecting it in roughly 2028. Absolutely not. So in the next 12 months, we will be introducing and rolling out a brand new system of essentially real-time disclosure for financial donation information. The Parliament made that change in the last term. It comes into force in July of next year. And that's something that we're going to be working really hard on over the next 12 months because it is going to be a big change to the way that people can access donations data and have oversight of the way that money works in Australian politics. We'll have more information about that, I would say, in probably the start of next year as we get closer to the 1 July launch date for that new system. We'll also be moving into redistributions. There are a couple of redistributions that we will be kicking off fairly quickly. Places like Queensland and Tasmania off the top of my head, where we needed to defer redistributions that were due at the start of the year because there was this pesky election that got called. Who could have seen that one coming? So we'll be kicking those ones off fairly soon. We'll also 1 year after the Parliament sits, we will be making the determination, the Commissioner, I should say, will be making the determination about how many seats each state is entitled to. This is based on population data that we get from the ABS, and that may prompt more redistributions as well. So we work really, really hard on redistributions between elections to make sure that the number of voters in every seat roughly balances out in every state and territory, which is important because it means that your vote is not any more or less valuable than the vote in someone electorate over from you. And it's going to be a big job. So once again, this is something that people can contribute to if they have views about, where the boundaries of electorates should be. So visit aec.gov.au/redistributions if you're interested in that. And of course, aec.gov.au is a great place to visit and of course to bookmark if you're a fan of the AEC, a fan of democracy. We've got lots of information on there about all things democratic.
Indeed. And of course, you can also follow the AEC on TikTok now.
We promise we won't do much dancing. We're trying to be a bit more sober and mature than that. But we are getting out there. We're doing content. We are doing things in video that I never would have done. I never would have been able to do. I don't think I would have been able to have approved 3 years ago when I was doing videos. It's a whole new world of vertical video and influencing and things like that.
Well, There you have it. Thank you so much for sitting down with us and telling us more about how the AEC works.
It has been an absolute pleasure. And of course, visit our website, aec.gov.au. We'd love to hear from you.
I say it all the time, aec.gov.au. The AEC is your friend. Go to their website and learn all sorts of things about how Australia's elections work. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, mate. You too.
And there you have it. Thank you so much for Alex for his time to helping us understand what the AEC does and also what it does not do. Make sure you check out the AEC website, aec.gov.au, to learn about how elections run, report to them if anyone doesn't authorize their electoral material, or just look up the disinformation register. It's always important that we understand how elections run and not fall misinformation. And also somehow we got through this entire interview without mentioning enrolling to vote once. If you haven't enrolled to vote and you're an Australian citizen, aec.gov.au/enroll. That one's also important. That's all from me. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to share, subscribe, comment down below what you'd like to learn about next, or who I should interview next. And also thank you so much to my supporters on Patreon, giving me that sweet, delicious money. I love it. I eat it. I eat money. Anyway, see you next time. Authorized by blah, 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 blah.